Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Artilist webinar series. My name is Sharice Ruan, Senior Director of Sales and Marketing at Artilist. Thank you for joining us for your compliance companion, Microsoft GCC High Explained. Today, we're joined by Artilist Solutions Architect, Gabe Corsini, to break down Microsoft as a tool for your CMMC compliance. We'd like for today's webinar to be more of a discussion, so please ask questions as you think of them via the question feature, and we will incorporate them into the presentation. Please note, if we do not get to your question during today's session, an Artilist representative will reach out to you to answer your question directly. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after today's session. If you have any questions after today's webinar, please email marketing@artilist.com. And now I'd like to turn it over to Gabe.
Awesome. Thanks, Sharice. Hopefully my audio is coming through okay. Awesome. Wow, great. I'm so glad to have everybody here. My name is Gabe Corsini. I'm a solutions architect here at Artilist. A little bit about me. Prior to joining Artilist back at the beginning of 2023, I was in the US Navy for 10 years, serving as an information systems technician. So did all of my IT career kind of coming up through the Navy with a lot of on-premise Windows systems, some Linux systems, and then eventually moving on to the last few years of my career at Naval Network Warfare Command, doing the Navy's largest migration from a lot of our legacy on-premise infrastructure into Azure and Microsoft 365 and the DoD cloud. I was the cloud operations supervisor for the enterprise help desk there, kind of riding the line between solutions architect and help desk manager. At the time of my leaving the Navy, we had migrated well over 500,000 users, and we're in the process of enrolling up to about 250,000 endpoints into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint in Intune. So that's kind of where I got a lot of my initial experience with the Microsoft 365 environment. Upon leaving, I came over to join the Artilist team, initially as a Microsoft 365 engineer and now as a solutions architect, to try to bring a lot of these Microsoft 365 features into the CMMC compliance space, especially where GCC High is concerned. So really looking forward to today's discussion and bringing as much information as I can about Microsoft 365 and specifically the GCC High Cloud, so that we can inform more users about how this can be a boon to your CMMC compliance program. So with that, we'll kind of jump in. Again, as Cherie said, if you have questions, pop them into the question feature here in the application, and we'll try to jump in and grab those questions as we move through the presentation. So quick agenda. As you know, we've already done our introduction. So we're going to cover some definitions so we're all kind of communicating the same language, talk about Microsoft's different cloud offerings, and then start getting into more in depth about GCC, specifically GCC High, talk a little bit about licensing, and then make sure we have enough time to also do some Q&A there at the end and discuss, what kind of next steps you could take with Artilist as well. So a little bit about us. Here at Artilist, as it says here, we are passionate change agents aiming to democratize access to effective cybersecurity. We've been doing this for a long time, well over a decade now, providing Microsoft expertise in a variety of different capacities. We have a lot of years of combined cyber operations experience as well as combined Microsoft experience. We are a Microsoft partner. We're also a registered provider organization, or RPO, with the Cyber AB as a CMMC accreditation body. And like a lot of folks who are probably here on this call, we're also government contractors. So we intimately understand the space that we're in, the compliance requirements that everyone's facing, and the challenges that come with that. So we're not just coming at this from, slapping the CMMC name tag on our offerings. We've been doing this for a while and want to try to bring this to as many people as we can. So as we're kind of getting started here, I felt it was important to define a couple of terms, as I want to make sure that we're all communicating in a similar language. And when you start looking at cloud environments, a lot of these terms come up time and time again, whether you're looking at a Microsoft environment or a Google or an AWS or even another cloud environment. You'll see these a lot. So the first term is tenant, which is just think of it as a dedicated and isolated instance, in this particular case, of a Microsoft cloud. It's usually based out of the Entra ID platform, which is Microsoft's identity management provider, and that an organization receives when they sign up for services like Azure and Microsoft 365. So when you buy a Microsoft 365 license, you are given a tenant. That tenant also connects you to your Azure cloud resources as well. The next term is enclave, which we can think of as a segregated and secure environment within the Microsoft ecosystem. If you're coming from the government or doing any sort of government networking, the word enclave is probably familiar, as we separate our different secure networks from one another and keep them logically and physically separated, both in how we control those environments, but also what kind of infrastructure we use. It's similar in the Microsoft ecosystem, especially as we start talking about the difference between commercial cloud and GCC High, and then also DoD and some of the other impact level clouds that go above that. The next two are probably familiar to a lot of folks, but just to kind of cover them, there's Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud computing platform. That's where we go to build resources like Azure Virtual Machines or Azure Web Applications. That's where we're going to be building specific cloud computing resources. And then there's Microsoft 365, which is that comprehensive suite of productivity and collaboration tools like Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and the Office applications. And is also now including a lot of the different security platforms that Microsoft has spent a lot of time and investment in trying to improve over the years. Next is FEDRAMP. We all hear a lot about FEDRAMP if you spend a lot of time in the CMMC space, but FEDRAMP stands for Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. This is a government-wide program that gives standardized security assessments and authorizations for cloud products that are used by federal agencies. So you'll hear a lot about, as you're working through your CMMC compliance, we need to make sure that this tool that we're using has a FedRAMP moderate authorized offering, or a FedRAMP moderate equivalency, or FedRAMP high equivalency, or FedRAMP high authorization. These are really important as you're considering, where am I inheriting controls from in these different cloud-based resources? And we'll talk about how Microsoft 365 has that FedRAMP authorization. And then the term of the hour, the one that it's on everybody's mind right now, is CMMC, which is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. So this is the framework developed by the DoD in conjunction with NIST that takes the NIST SP 800-171 for protecting and controlling the use of controlled unclassified information, or CUI, and adds that assessment level requirement on top. Now we have the 800-171 Alpha, or A, which says this is all of the controls you have to meet and assess to. The CMMC takes that and says, now we're going to add the third-party assessment requirement on top of that. So we all need to go out and get assessed by C3PAOs to make sure that we're actually attesting to, and not just saying a self-attestation, an actual third-party attestation of, I am compliant with all of these controls. So there's some definitions. You'll see these come up a lot as we continue through the presentation. I just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page there. All right, let's dive in directly into some of the Microsoft Cloud offerings. So as you start talking about Microsoft clouds, whether it's Azure or Microsoft 365, you're going to hear a lot of different terms. This could be global, GCC and GCC High, Microsoft or Azure Germany, Azure China, and then also Azure Government, which is specifically the DoD clouds and also includes the newer IL6 and IL7. We'll talk about the IL, or impact levels, in a little bit. Clouds, which is for storing specifically secret and top secret information. So we have all of these different cloud environments, but how does that apply to those of us who are working in the defense industrial base and have to adhere to CMMC? So let's dive into a couple of these. The first is the global cloud. This is commonly also referred to as commercial or public cloud. This is the standard cloud environment or cloud offering that's offered by Microsoft and is designed to serve customers all across the globe, especially if you don't have a specific data sovereignty requirement where your data has to be located in a specific geopolitical region, or if you just need some simple collaboration tools. The global cloud or commercial cloud is the standard offering, and for a lot of folks going into Microsoft, you can just go and purchase the licenses you need. What makes it so great is it's got a lot of global reach. So the commercial cloud is available for everybody that doesn't have these specific data residency or region requirements. So it is allowing extensive access for users worldwide. It's very cost effective. You'll find that commercial cloud is less expensive than some of the other specific cloud environments. So they have a lot of competitive pricing models and a large variety of services that you can choose from to build a cost-effective environment for you and your organization. And it also comes with a ton of robust compliance and security tools. Last year, Microsoft announced their Secure Future initiative, which is a change in posture for Microsoft, saying instead of just releasing these tools and then having to go back and release huge numbers of patches on Tuesday to fix all of these problems that we're seeing, we're now going to start building all of our tools and improving all of our offerings with security in mind first. So the Secure Future initiative is all about how do we bring extensive compliance services to all of our customers right from the jump? How do we improve their security posture by giving them access to these really important and robust security tools, a lot of which now are implementing artificial intelligence or machine learning models to make them even better and continuously improve them over time. That Secure Future initiative is saying security first baked into every single product and offering that we have. Microsoft 365 Global Cloud gives everybody, and that's organizations of all sizes, the ability to leverage the benefits of cloud computing to ensure accessibility, affordability, and security. So next, let's talk a little bit about the Government Community Cloud. The Government Community Cloud was an offering that was a specialized cloud computing environment that is designed to meet the unique needs and evolving requirements of the U.S. federal, state, local, and tribal governments, as well as contractors who are holding or processing data on behalf of the U.S. government. It has some specific compliance requirements it has to meet. The Government Community Cloud, or Azure Government as it's also called, is a FedRAMP moderate environment. It has a FedRAMP moderate authorization. If you're ever curious about whether or not a tool has a FedRAMP authorization, you can go to marketplace.fedramp.com or .gov, excuse me, and you can search for these different products in the FedRAMP marketplace to understand what authorization does it have, is it pending, is it valid, and when is it valid till. So the Government Community Cloud is a FedRAMP moderate environment. So it does have much stricter security standards for how data can be controlled, processed, and stored in that environment. The biggest part of that is data residency. If you're in the Government Community Cloud, your data is stored within regions that are inside of the United States. These are data centers that are part of the United States. Now, something that we'll talk about in a little while is that there's Azure Commercial, and then there's the Microsoft 365 GCC. GCC is associated with Azure Commercial, the cloud computing environment. So there is some concerns there about how do I properly control my data, and we're going to talk about that here shortly. But the important part here is if you're controlling data on behalf or ingesting data on behalf of the US government because of the work that you're doing, you're going to need to, at a minimum, probably be in the Government Community Cloud because you're going to need these data residency requirements and some of these isolation requirements that come as a guarantee of having that FedRAMP moderate authorization. So this helps to make sure that you can stay compliant with whatever the government need that you have, whether that's state, local, tribal, and in some cases, federal government. That takes us, though, into the GCC High, or Government Community Cloud High environment. And this is that next level up where we get into what is now a strictly Azure government environment. This is designed to meet the needs of U.S. government entities and contractors who are handling highly sensitive and controlled unclassified information, especially what we refer to as CUI specified, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So for compliance standards, one, it's FedRAMP High authorized. Some folks might have seen that recently, that FedRAMP High authorization became official in the FedRAMP marketplace, I think around December timeframe, which was really important because before that, we were relying on some different ATOs that the DoD was giving to the GCC High environment. Now we have that FedRAMP authorization as well. So we have the assurances as a FedRAMP High environment that we're getting and inheriting a lot of the security controls, especially around physical security of their data centers. That's really important to have. For data residency, all of that data is stored within the United States. And the other important caveat there is when you're reaching out to Microsoft support, you are only ever getting from the GCC High environment a Microsoft US citizen who is has an active additional background check and some other verifications to support you in whatever your issue is that when you submit that trouble ticket. So that's really important. You're never going to get a person from another data center in another part of the world when you're submitting trouble tickets through GCC High. So you can rest assured that you're getting a US citizen. Some specific use cases here around GCC High. It's designed for federal agencies and for contractors. We used it for a little while when I was in the Navy, when we were trialing out the process of moving data to the DoD cloud. We started in a GCC High environment, but its intended purpose is for highly sensitive CUI, and this can include CUI specify like ITAR, which comes up a lot. But ITAR, controlled technical information, nuclear information, especially if you work in the NNPI space, that's really important. GCC High has the FEDRAMP authorization and the controls in place to be able to control and store that data. It does have stricter compliance controls. So as a result of that, some features that might not be available, that are available in commercial, or maybe even in GCC, might not yet be available in GCC High. And usually we're talking about more of the cutting edge new features that are coming out in commercial, not the core collaboration and security suite of tools. But some of those features might lag behind in the GCC High environment as a result of having stricter security and compliance requirements. So they have to go through a more strict development process before they can be brought into the GCC High cloud. You'll hear a lot of folks like the solutions architects at Artilus or other organizations refer to that as feature parity. So GCC High does not have feature parity with commercial because they're things that have not been fully brought into GCC High. That's typically stuff like I mentioned here, the advanced Copilot features, Copilot for security, Copilot chat, these things are available in GCC High, but you're not going to get some of the more new or advanced features that are coming out with Copilot today. It might take 6 to 12 months before that gets to GCC High. Or a big one for me is Entra Global Secure Access. This is the secure web gateway and SSE solution, or secure service edge, from Microsoft, is available in commercial. It's not yet available in GCC High, as it has to go through this much more strict development process to make sure it's meeting those security and compliance requirements. So when we're comparing GCC and GCC High, which is a lot of where we're seeing contractors who are working in the defense industrial base, especially those who have to comply with CMMC, are oftentimes comparing, well, which one do I need? Can I get away with just GCC, or do I need to go up a level to GCC High? And let's talk about that for a second. So from a compliance standard, you do get that FedRAMP moderate with GCC, but you get FedRAMP high with GCC High. You also get the authorizations for ITAR, some DFARS certification, and GCC High is considered that DoD SRG level 4, which is called Impact level 4, just means that it can host additional CUI and other types of data that complies with NIST 800-171. For data residency, again, we do have that data sovereignty requirement across both platforms, where all of our data is stored in the United States and it's only being supported by US screened citizens, with GCC High having some additional background checks and additional security requirements for all of their support personnel who work with GCC High. Both GCC and GCC High meet very similar use cases for federal, state, local, and tribal governments. The biggest part there is that GCC is not suitable for CUI specified data. So that's any data that has a specific control requirement, depending on who's providing that information, whether it's ITAR, CTI, NNPI, etc. And you'll find a lot of the core features of Microsoft 365 are available in both clouds, with GCC High lagging a little bit behind GCC in commercial due to the stricter compliance and security requirements before features can be fully brought into GCC High. They have to meet those stricter compliance requirements that come associated with that FedRAMP High authorization.
Hey, Gabe, we have We have a quick
Sure.
question. Given that all of Microsoft's commercial Office 365 environments are also certified as FedRAMP High, uh, the this person doesn't understand some of the distinctions and the value I think we have in the key features listed for GCC High.
Sure. So the question is asking that all Microsoft 365 environments are FedRAMP High?
I think that's the statement that's being made. Yes.
Sure. I'd have to verify that, but at last check, and this I was checking the marketplace the other day and I was going through some of the Microsoft documentation just to validate this for the webinar. The Not all environments are FedRAMP high. There is still some FedRAMP moderate, and I'm happy to double check this and get that answer back to you specifically. But there is FedRAMP moderate authorization for the Azure, some of like the GCC environment or commercial environments. That said, the biggest problem, and I guess the biggest distinction, and I think this particular diagram speaks to it really, really well. When you're talking about CUI, especially CUI specified, as we kind of dig into more of the compliance piece here, the biggest consideration that I encourage everyone to make is where is your data going to live? When you're in Azure Commercial and even GCC, which is still Microsoft 365 government, but lives on the Azure Commercial network, you can't always guarantee that my data lives within the United States. It's the only time you get that guarantee and can get that level of assurance, as well as that full FedRAMP high authorization, is if you're going to be in a GCC high environment where we know for a fact we're in US sovereign data centers only, manned by US sovereign personnel or citizens with extensive background checks. So we have these different levels of assurance to let us know we have that ATO and we know our data is protected. And the other part here I think is really important is what type of CUI do you have? And I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. If you just have CUI basic and you know for a fact that's all you're ever going to handle, and even FCI to a degree, GCC is fine. And even you can see here in this diagram, Microsoft 365 commercial to a degree is fine, but it's not intended for it to meet these government requirements. Microsoft 365 GCC can do FCI and CUI basic information. Once you get even just a tiny bit outside of that, and you have something with an export control or something with a specification that has specific guarding requirements, you have to be in GCC High. GCC is not suitable for anything past CUI basic or FCI. So I think that's the question that every organization has to ask is, what type of data are we handling? And can we guarantee we will never deal with more than CUI basic and FCI? So I'll go back and verify the FedRAMP authorizations. Maybe something has changed, or maybe I missed something in the documentation, and we can get that answer back to you. But I appreciate the question. Are there any other questions while we're at it, Sharice?
No, that's it for now.
Sure. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. Please let us know if you need some other clarifications, but I can go back and double check that information and we can get an answer to you. Let's go back to this slide. So again, this particular diagram I think is really important. What I want to call attention to, if you can see my mouse, is these two lines right here. So you'll see it says Microsoft 365 Government GCC, and under the CUI and CMMC level 2 and level 3, we get a resounding yes for GCC High and a yes with a caveat for GCC. And that caveat down here, and I'm not sure if you can see it, says CUI specified, e.g. ITAR, nuclear, etc., is not suitable because it requires US sovereignty. And the reason why they say that is, well, yes, Microsoft 365 does have that data residency requirement as purpose of being a FedRAMP moderate environment, but it's running off of the Azure commercial network. And you cannot guarantee that the customer support that you can receive while in GCC High is strictly US citizens. The guarantee is not there. Microsoft doesn't claim to make the guarantee either. So I think that that's really, really important to keep in mind. And you can see here it says it again, ITAR, EAR, no foreign, not suitable for GCC. And yes, it can meet the 853 and 171 requirements, but it can't provide protection, specific protection for any type of export control or other CUI specified data. And I think that that's really important to call out. And for some organizations who this might matter for, CJIS, the CJIS agreement for Microsoft 365 GCC is just on the state level versus federal for GCC High. So some really, really important distinctions here to be made in just these four boxes. In GCC High, we get those assurances from Microsoft in part of being a FedRAMP High authorized environment, and also through all their documentations and their other authorities to operate they've been provided by the government, that we can protect and control FCI and CMMC level 1 data, which would be CUI basic, or just really FCI. And then we can do CUI basic and CUI specified. And then we can also do ITAR, EAR, no foreign, all of which takes that NIST 800-171 plus some additional requirements for some export control requirements. All of that is feasible here in the Microsoft 365 GCC High environment. The important question to ask your organization when you're considering why GCC High is it comes down to these key factors. Do you have that DFARS 252.204/7012 requirement in your contract, right? Which is the implication that you need to implement the NIST SP 800-171 to safeguard CUI. Do you store, process, or transmit CUI specified data? So that is, like we've talked about a couple times now, export controlled, nuclear controlled tactical information, etc. Anything that has a specific control requirement, where CUI basic is controlled unclassified information that doesn't have a specific control requirement based on the contract office that it's coming from. If you have specified data, this is something to consider. And the last one, and this is more of a preference, but I think is something that every organization should consider, is, are you already using Microsoft 365? Is this already an environment that you're familiar with, and you want to maintain some familiarity for yourself, for your organization and your users as you move into a GCC High environment, as that experience and continuity for your organization is really going to matter when it comes to determining how quickly are we going to become productive again after a migration. And if you answered yes to all of that, or at least to 1 and 2, then yes, GCC High is the place for you to be. It's a perfect platform for either a cloud-centric or a hybrid Microsoft environment that's looking to achieve CMMC Level 2 compliance and ensure they can contribute to the national security mission for safeguarding CUI. It's got that FedRAMP High authorization, it's Impact Level 4, and it has some advanced security and compliance features that are fantastic. It's a perfect all-in-one solution. So we can spend a few minutes talking about, okay, so your organization picked GCC High. That's great. What kind of licenses do we need? And I get this question a lot. And for Artalist and for Tesseract programs, we break it down into, yeah.
Can I stop you real quick before we go into the licenses?
Sure.
We do have a question about whether you would recommend changing from Gmail to Microsoft, as the costs are high for a small business within or with 30 employees.
Yeah. So let's go back here to some of these key factors, right? And I think that gets down to question number 3 is, are you already using Microsoft 365 or not? And if you're using Google Workspace, for example, if that's something you're very, very familiar with, and moving away from Google Workspace would not make you productive, that is a key factor that I think an organization should consider. Now, from my perspective, as someone who's worked in this Microsoft environment for a very long time, the level of assurances that Microsoft is giving me across all of its features and those FedRAMP authorizations gives me a lot more confidence as an organization that needs to achieve CMMC that I'm going to be able to meet all 110 objectives, all 110 controls in CMMC level 2. Where Google has the ability, and we know this from information that's come out between being able to specify in a Google Workspace that you can keep your data hosted in a specific region, and you can put in a bunch of variety of different controls and configurations to make sure you get stuff like data loss prevention, so on and so forth, where we see, and I don't want to say it falls short, but where we see some differences, some key distinctions that I think matter, especially to someone like me who is very familiar with the Microsoft environment, is what kind of control do you have over your endpoint? And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other tools in a little while, but what kind of controls do you have over your endpoint? Are you using something like Microsoft Intune, or are you having to go find another third-party mobile device management solution and then couple that with your Google Workspace? What kind of endpoint detection and response capabilities or security capabilities do you have? What kind of assurances are we getting from data loss prevention? I think when you take all those things and consider them, you have to understand what's the price impact for an organization of making those choices. Do we stick with Google Workspace and then find other FedRAMP authorized third-party solutions to help us solve for these things that Google maybe can't do either natively or isn't as strongly suited for? Mobile device management is the one that comes to mind a lot for me, as Google has some ability. For Chrome OS, it's fantastic, but for Windows devices, it's pretty limited and very, very manual. Do you have someone on your team who can handle that for you, who can do that device management just native in the Google Workspace environment? Or do we now have to invest the money in all the licensing to go and get another third-party solution to help us solve for that problem? And I think that that matters. So, it comes down to what's the cost of getting familiar with a new platform? What's the cost of staying where we are, putting all the extra work into making those controls happen, and then figuring out what other third-party applications or solutions do we need that maybe Google Workspace falls short on. I think Google Workspace is fantastic. And as a matter of fact, one of our other solutions architects comes from the Google Workspace world, and we're working on finding CMMC centric solutions around letting folks stay with Google Workspace if they have it. But we are running into these barriers of, do we have to have solutions where we're coupling with a Microsoft environment or having another third party solution come in to solve for problems that Google hasn't put a lot of attention to, and maybe for good reason, because it's not a focus of their mission. So I think you need to really spend some time to understand what's the cost benefit analysis or the risks of doing one versus the other. Um, it Again, if the decision was up to someone like me, I would always recommend Microsoft is as comprehensive as it gets. It has everything that you need, and maybe the price tag is higher, but I think it's higher for a reason. And I think it's because you're getting a lot more feature set and tool set and security and compliance for the price of the license. But that's a personal opinion. I would love to get into that discussion though with you and kind of get a feel for where your organization is at with that decision and what kind of key factors you're considering, and see if there's a way that we can't help you find either a middle ground or a solution in one side or the other. So we'll definitely reach out and see if we can't help you come up with a solution for that. I appreciate the question. Any other questions, Charisse?
Sorry, yeah, we have a couple of them here. If a company does not get any ITAR, EAR, no foreign, is it better to get GCC? This particular company feels like they don't need level 2 and may only need to get level 1.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's a you're coming at it from the right direction, in my opinion, which is, what kind of data am I going to be handling? That data that I'm handling should dictate a lot of the decision of, what do I actually need then? If I get ITAR, I need GCC High. There's no other ifs, ands, or buts about that. But if I don't, if I just get FCI data, for example, maybe you're a contractor who puts, I call them feet and seats, where you're providing contractors to a specific mission that's working on a government site, and the only information that you're getting from your government contract partner, either your prime or from the DoD itself, is just billing information or FCI related information to the contract that you're supporting, where the actual CUI work is happening on a government facility. In that case, GCC, I think, would be more than sufficient. I think it goes back to, though, that determination. Will you only ever get FCI? Will you only ever get CUI basic? If the answer is that is yes, and you know that you're not changing your model or will have no possibility to receive that data in the future, I think GCC High is absolutely, I'm sorry, I think GCC is a perfectly viable option for your business. It's that gray area of, well, we're not sure. We could get that because we've got some other opportunities that we're looking to go after, and we might have to handle some ITAR data or some EAR or CTI or some other type of CUI specified. If that's the kind of thought process you're having to walk through, I think the investment then into GCC High ensures that you're ready to safeguard that data and then win those opportunities by being able to say, we're already in a compliant environment. We've already done all the work to be compliant. That gives you that a competitive advantage when you're going out and competing, for bids for those kinds of contracts. So I think that comes back to that deciding line. So you go back to this chart here. If you're just doing FCI and need CMMC level 1, GCC High is absolutely, or I'm sorry, GCC, I keep confusing them, I apologize. GCC is absolutely a fine selection for you in that case. You will see we do have Microsoft 365 commercial with that caveat, and that one caveat is that Microsoft 365 commercial is not intended for government requirements. My recommendation would be that if you're going to work with the government, if you're going to do CMMC level 1 or FCI, then go for GCC. It just gives you that level of assurance and those extra controls. And then go for GCC High if you're going to have to be CMMC level 2 and have to have any type of CUI specified. So I hope that answers your question. If you have any other questions, please let us know. What else you got for me, Cherise?
Can we spin up VMs in GCC High like we can do in Azure? How about using Intune and MDM to secure endpoints like phones and laptops?
Absolutely, you can. We have customers today who spin up virtual workloads or different types of workloads inside of Azure and GCC High. So Azure Government does have a lot of availability for a ton of the different cloud compute resources. Where you'll get into some distinctions again is if something brand new just hit commercial, don't expect it to be in GCC High. So if that's critical to your workload, that's something to keep in mind. But spinning up virtual machines, we have some customers who use Azure Virtual Desktops. We have a couple of customers who just use Windows servers or Linux servers to do a variety of things. We spin up the Linux servers when we're working on different types of log ingestion from third-party hardware that doesn't have a native connector to some of our security tools. So you absolutely can. Intune, another great one. Yes, you absolutely can use Intune. We use it actively today. We push policies to all of our customers and their endpoints based on CMMC and meeting those objectives. We do everything from the normal mobile device management of securing the device to only be able to conduct specific activity or be able to do specific functions, all the way to mobile application management to include support for some organizations who choose to supporting BYOD or bring your own device for organizations who have users who want to be able to check email on their personal devices. With mobile application management coupled with BYOD, we have a lot of controls and assurances that we can put in place around making sure that we're protecting data in a variety of different environments. So yes, Intune's absolutely available. The one caveat, not even a caveat, the one call out that I would make is if you're looking for autopilot, which a lot of customers who are coming from commercial really, really love, there is an autopilot-like feature in GCC High. It is not the fully robust autopilot that you can expect from commercial, where you get that beautiful out-of-box experience where all that setup is done for you. You get some of those features in GCC High as the Microsoft Federal development team and product group for Intune has had to rework some of that to meet some of the compliance needs. According to some contacts that I still maintain from the Microsoft side from my Navy days, that those features are still being fleshed out fully. So you get some, but not the full capabilities of something like Windows Autopilot. So, however, we work with that all the time. We deal with that daily. So we have a ton of documentation around how to, set up devices when we only have that partial autopilot style feature. So hopefully that answers your question. Please let us know in the questions feature if you have any other follow-ons. What else, Cherise?
We handle both NIST 800 171 ITAR and commercial customers. Is the only way for us to separate the 7 or 8 users who handle CUI to GCC High from normal, less expensive 365 licenses are to use 2 different domain names, or is there a hybrid setup? Or is the requirement that everyone must move to GCC High because data is handled in the company as a whole?
That's a really, really good question. So there is no hybrid setup. And if by hybrid you mean somehow associating a commercial environment with a Microsoft 365 government environment like GCC High, you can't connect them. There's some limited guest sharing features or cross-tenant access features that you can put in place depending on what you need, but we use those very, very sparingly as it brings into question access to data. And when you're talking about protecting the confidentiality of CUI, you want to be very, very strict about who has access to what. We have a lot of customers who do both government and commercial work. The recommendation we typically make is this: if 40 or 50% of your business is touching CUI, it's probably more cost effective in the long run to go fully into GCC High. If only 7 or 8 of your employees are really doing that government-centered work and are handling CUI, while the rest of your employees are primarily supporting commercial and just communications about different things, I would say a separate enclave approach, as we call it, would be ideal, where you would maintain your commercial environment, spin up a separate cloud-only Microsoft 365 GCC High environment to support the work of those 7 or 8 people in their work with their contract, without having to do a full migration. We see that very, very often. We've talked to customers and have multiple customers in that exact scenario where they already have a good commercial running of their business. They need that to stay the same, but a subset of their users or of their employees work on government contracts and they're the only ones handling CUI. Where you have to make the dividing line is who's touching CUI or who needs to touch CUI. And if that's a large subset of your business, I'd say anywhere up to 40%, 50% or more, then cost effect, like at that point, it's not cost effective to keep everybody in commercial, but then also buy double licenses for half of your business to be in GCC High. There's a couple of licensing combinations we recommend that might make it more cost effective in some ways, but at that point, it's like, are we really saving a lot of money? The answer is probably not. So do we need to make the investment of moving everybody into GCC High and then operating our commercial business out of there? I think that's kind of some of the consideration, and I'd love to get more into that and really understand, where does that dividing line sit for you, and what kind of options could we recommend? Because I'll talk about when we go back to the licenses is, we have a couple of different that we can talk about, and those licenses I think might help make it a bit of a difference. Any other questions, Sharice?
Will it be hard to scale up from GCC to GCC High if the need arises in the future?
Um, that depends. I think that there will be there will be a hurdle, because ultimately, if you are in GCC today and you start needing, or the need to handle CUI specified or ITAR data comes up, you still have to migrate to GCC High, which comes with its own hurdles. We partner with a FEDRAMP High authorized migration partner or migration tool to make those migrations as seamless and as easy as possible. And it's a phenomenal tool that makes it super easy. But there's other stuff too. There's still device enrollment. There's still a lot of other small hurdles. There's still domain name changes that have to happen to get to GCC High. So there's hurdles there. The question then comes down to how quickly do you need to be able to get to GCC High? If the requirement's still 6 months out, you've got time, and I would consider making that move. If you're just not sure if the future is going to require you to do that, I think that comes down to what your business can handle doing today as far as making a transition from GCC to GCC High. Good question, though. Thank you. What else, Sharice?
I think some of these you'll answer as we go on, so I will circle back to some questions after we get through a couple more slides.
Cool. I'll jump through a couple more of these to try to make some recommendations. We've got about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions. So when we start talking about Microsoft licensing, a lot of this will look familiar. You'll see some slightly different denominations for the type of license, and I'll explain why. But we typically recommend 3 different license combinations. The first is the Microsoft 365 G5. If you're coming from commercial, this is the exact same license as the E5. Microsoft markets it as the G5 as it's the government enterprise E5 style license, but when you actually purchase the license and it shows up in your environment, it'll say E5. So not to be confused, but it's the same as the E5 license. It gives you that full suite of Microsoft 365 tools, all the advanced security and compliance features you need to include DLP and endpoint management, as well as is fully equipped to protect CUI. So that's one option. The other option for some of our folks who are considering that separate enclave approach, where we're going to do most of our work in commercial, but we need to be able to do some work in GCC High, and maybe we don't want that just strictly web only experience, we typically recommend the G5 with a Windows 365 virtual desktop. Still gives you that full rich client desktop style experience that a lot of people are used to when they're dealing with Microsoft 365 applications, but you're getting a dedicated Windows 365 virtual desktop, which is hosted in those GCC High data centers. So we're inheriting all those FEDRAMP High authorizations, and you can secure CUI and access that environment in a very secure and compliant way while still being in your normal commercial environment on your day-to-day basis. We have some secure mechanisms to log into those environments through policies to make sure that you can go in and do your CUI related work and then come back to doing your commercial work. The last option that we typically recommend is a combination of what's called the F3 and then the F5 security and compliance license. The F stands for frontline. So this is users who are going to primarily just be accessing Microsoft 365 via the web. This could be a 1099 employee who just needs to be able to get in and take a look at some accounting information or take a look at some specific documentation. It could be somebody who's sitting on site with a government and is using a government furnished equipment or GFE and just needs to be able to go back and access their corporate account, their corporate email, and maybe still interact with CUI in that way without necessarily being on a managed endpoint. This web-only environment works really, really great. And we put a lot of security and compliance policies in place through stuff like Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps to prevent CUI from being removed from that environment when you're not on a compliant device. So those are our 3 typical recommendations. If you have any questions about that, let us know. I do get a lot of questions about why not just go for the G3? Why not just Business Premium? Business Premium has a lot of features, and this is why. This is an excerpt from a white paper that we have, which should be on our website, but if you would like to see the white paper, please let us know and we can get that emailed out. But it talks a little bit about what the difference in different features would be if you don't have the E5 license or the F3 and F5 combination license without the endpoint management. If you just have an E3, if you just have a business premium, you start to miss out on a lot of different features. To kind of illustrate this example, I kind of came up with a brief case study of the differences between G5 and that business premium. Specifically, when we're complying with the SC.L2 tag 3.13.1, this is all about protecting and controlling CUI at key internal and external boundaries. So in scenario 1, we're on a Microsoft 365 Business Premium with a physical Windows endpoint, and in scenario 2, we have the G5. Some key differences. One, in the Business Premium, we're just going to get Microsoft Intune for Business, versus in G5, we get the Intune Plan 1, which is the enterprise version of Intune. Both can be encrypted with BitLocker and run in FIPS mode, which is fantastic. One of the other factors here is both of these users can use the Microsoft 365 desktop application, so they can interact with their CUI through the rich client desktop access. But one key feature here that I want to call out is you don't get endpoint data loss prevention, which is a service provided by Microsoft Purview. That's Microsoft's big compliance platform. With Business Premium, you don't get any endpoint DLP. So once something is downloaded to the device, and if I move that document out of OneDrive and into like the documents folder, the downloads folder in my computer, I do not have the ability to then protect that file wherever it goes. Whereas with the G5, I do. So to try to illustrate that, here's a quick diagram. If we have an authorized user, they're on a managed endpoint, they download a CUI document from SharePoint, they're modifying that document, they're unhappy with it, whether it's verbiage or structure or whatever, and they decide, you know what, AI does it better. So they're going to go and open up an unmanaged Chrome browser because they like Chrome, and they're going to upload it to some unauthorized AI tool that maybe wasn't built in the United States. If you've read the news, that's pretty frequent right now. The problem with Microsoft 365 Business Premium in this particular scenario is we don't get that endpoint data loss prevention. So when I go to upload that document to this unauthorized AI tool, there is nothing stopping that user from doing that action. They're in an unmanaged browser with a controlled document that the endpoint no longer has control over, putting it in an unauthorized tool that probably doesn't belong to the organization, or at least isn't running in a compliant cloud, we've now spilled our data, and that's a problem. Versus if we have that G5 license. The key difference here is when that user goes to use that unmanaged Chrome browser, they're first going to get an alert that says, hey, you can't upload this controlled document here. Go back to your managed Microsoft Edge browser. Okay, fine. So they go back to their Microsoft Edge browser. They go to unauthorized AI tool from another country, and they try to upload that document. It's going to tell them, absolutely not. We do not authorize you to upload this here because we've blocked this tool from being made available to you. In a lot of cases, too, using stuff like Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps and Smart Screen through Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, we're probably going to block you from even getting into that application to begin with. But just in case we don't, with that endpoint DLP, if we've blocked that domain, you're not uploading any data. I've now protected my CUI from going places it shouldn't. And maybe I redirect everybody to say, hey, we bought Microsoft 365 Copilot. Go use Copilot, which sits inside of our FedRAMP High environment, our GCC High environment, and it is protecting our organizational data. Go use Copilot. Oh, okay, well, I still get an AI tool. It's just one that I can trust. So I think that's really, really important when you're considering how do I protect my data in these different environments. Some different tools that we'll talk about really quick, and then I'll hopefully have enough time to answer some more questions. Microsoft Sentinel. This is Microsoft's scalable cloud native security information and event management platform, also called a SIEM. Provides a lot of security, intelligent security analytics, threat intelligence across the enterprise. It also does what we call SOAR, which is security orchestration, automation, and response to detect, investigate, and respond to cyber threats efficiently. We use it every single day. It's one of my favorite tools in the whole world. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I'll talk about it probably more than you'd like. We also have Microsoft Intune, which we talked about a little bit before. So we do get those full, nice, robust MDM and MAM, or mobile application management features, to control how our devices are used, how they interact with our data, and make sure they can enforce compliance, all the way across to include both corporate and personal devices. That's really, really important. And then the Microsoft XDR. This used to be called Microsoft 365 Defender, but it takes Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, Defender for Cloud Apps, and brings it into a single extended detection and response tool that brings in a ton of the new AI innovations and machine learning innovations to help provide holistic protection from cyber attacks to your organization. We use this every single day, and it works phenomenally. Really quick, next steps. We're going to be in touch with a lot of you, but you could always go to our website and check out our NIST SP 800-171 self-assessment tool, which you can then use to upload an SPRS score, which is fantastic. We have a ton of other great content. We have a YouTube channel with a lot of our webinars that have been recorded, have been uploaded to, so check us out on YouTube. But you can also get in touch with us and start a free trial where we'll do a lot of the risk assessments and information for you and help you determine what's the best program for you. So with that, I know I walked through that last pit pretty quickly, but what other questions do you guys have? I'm happy to answer them with the couple minutes we have left.
All right. Does Microsoft provide the SSP and POEM for this solution to meet this requirement?
Microsoft can upon request. So Microsoft does not make it publicly available, but if you, for example, purchase a program through Artlist, as your Microsoft partner, we can help make those requests to Microsoft to provide whatever information. They do provide some of it that's public to, it's on their Microsoft Learn portal or their documentation portal. Otherwise, if you want like the full ATO package for FEDRAMP High authorization, you have to have a CAC, so you have to be able to log into the FEDRAMP marketplace and then request it, and you have to have a pretty good reason. But they do make some of it available on request, at least enough to understand like how does that fit into your compliance program, and we can help you get that information if you needed it.
All right. What Microsoft level would achieve level 1 and 2? Also, would they also do the audit portion and monitoring in the solution, or would you have to get a separate provider for that portion?
Sure. So if you need level 1 and level 2, I would recommend GCC High. Because with level 2, we're doing the full suite of the CMMC 110 controls, and we're probably protecting CUI specified, so we need to be in GCC High. As far as audit and monitoring, All of that is included in the Microsoft 365 platform. So we leverage tools like I talked about, Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft XDR, and some other tools to help audit permissions, audit to make sure that different security controls are still effective. So we do security control monitoring, and also just checking for routine security threats like insider risk, external threats from nation state or other types of actors, et cetera. So everything's kind of baked in. It's just a matter of what switches you flip and what licenses you have. But we leverage those tools every single day.
Is virtual desktop for Microsoft Office applications only? Can we install our own commercial applications?
Yeah, the Windows, if you're referring to the Windows 365 virtual desktop, you can install other applications as well. You can deploy them via Intune, or if you have local admin permissions on the endpoint, which we typically don't recommend, we typically try to deploy everything through Intune. You can deploy it through Intune and have other third-party applications. What really matters is what those applications are and how resource intensive they are. So we can happily talk to you about what kind of applications you would need and help you determine, is Windows 365 the best option? Do you need to use a different type of solution? We can help you figure out what that is.
Can you talk about the costs of getting GCC or GCC High licenses for 3 people, as we would have a separate environment for just company use?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have cost figures right here off the top of my head, and if I did, I'm not sure I'd be able to get them to you in 3 minutes. But let us reach out to you and let's try to get you some initial prices. Maybe we can give you some budgetary information on what that would initially cost. Really, that comes down to, what do you need? Do you need Windows 365? Do you need a fully virtualized desktop environment? Do you just need web only and to be able to just maybe get and receive and send email? A lot of that really depends on what licenses we recommend and what the cost of that program would be. But we can reach out and let you know and try to get you some budgetary information together. I'd happily do that.
I'm a small company. How do I get GCC High, and what are the costs? So again, you talked to cost, but I think we could talk a little bit about the eligibility process and stuff. I don't know if we got there.
Yeah, so as far as GCC High eligibility, there is a form that you have to fill out. It's on Microsoft's website. So we have a GCC High eligibility, call it SOP or just instructions that we can send you. So shoot us an email to that marketing@artilus.com, and we can get you that GCC High eligibility instructions. You go and you fill out that form. The biggest requirements is, like, you have to have a CAGE code or an NAICS code or NAICE code, or a SAM.gov account that is going to provide the required information that Microsoft is going to need to say, are you eligible to have GCC High? Again, cost depends on what you need for your program and what kind of access you need, but we can also talk about that as well, and give you some budgetary information. So just reach out to us at that email address. We can get you the GCC High eligibility guidance.
Do you have any advice for an SMB that is pursuing contracts that may have CUI, but they seem to be gated by requiring CMMC level 3 just to bid?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I'm surprised that you're seeing a contract that has CMMC level 3 as a requirement right now, when CMMC level 3 isn't officially published yet. So CMMC level 2 is. We know the final ruling came out back in September with the publication of the 32 CFR. I know we're waiting on, I think it's the 48 CFR, if I recall, because we had the legislation pause. But CMMC level 3 is not official yet. So I'd be interested to know what the contract language is stating there, that's saying that you have to have CMMC level 3 when there's no possible way to comply with CMMC level 3. There are some initial assessment guides out there for what CMMC level 3 is going to ask for, which incorporates the NIST 800-172 requirements on top of the 171. So it adds some additional controls, some of which are optional, some of which are not. I'd be really curious to know what that language is stating in your contract, because to gate that behind CMMC level 3, I think is kind of interesting. I'll take that back to some of my more compliance-minded folks, some of our CCAs that we have, and see what their thoughts are too. But reach out to us at marketing@artilus.com. I'd love to have a discussion about what that language is saying, and see if that's really a requirement you need to meet, or if you just need to prove that you're making your way towards that.
All right. I think that's all for today. I want to thank you, Gabe, and our audience for such a great discussion today. We have now concluded our session. If we did not get to your question, again, an Artilus representative will reach out to answer your question directly. We're going to be sending those follow-up emails with the recording, as well as the slides and some other helpful resources. about the topics that we covered here today. If you have any additional questions or need more information, please, like Gabe said, email us at marketing@artilist.com and we'll be happy to assist. You can always visit us on our website, www.artilist.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.